or something like that. It's getting crazy. I can't keep track of them all. But we're grateful for so many people attending each and every session. I also want to take a moment to welcome our speaker today and thank her for her time and for her energy and for being so kind to present to our team. Pat Broton. How do we say your last name, Pat? Broughton, who is a CFRE and a senior consultant at Evolve. Pat has been working in fundraising for a number of years now, and she particularly likes to work with visionary and really big mission-based organizations on their fundraising and engagement work with volunteers. She's really passionate about cultivating lifelong donors and for the organizations. And I'm going to turn it over to Pat now and thank her one more time for her time today.
Thanks so much, Tom. It is great to be here. One of the joys for me of being a consultant, so I was a frontline fundraiser for almost 30 years and started consulting about a year and a half ago. And one of the joys of this work is that I get to have an impact, no matter how small, with a whole variety of different organizations. So I'm really delighted to be here today and to talk with all of you. I've had some conversation with Tula. I have just a speaking acquaintance with the work that Easter Seals does, and I know how really, really important it is. So thank you for having me here. And a special hello to Michael, who I know from some other, or from the AFP arenas. I'm also,
hi there.
Nice to see you. I'm also on the board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Chicago chapter, as is Tula. And I serve as the treasurer, and for 3 years was the vice president.
That video, oh geez, they saw me getting a haircut. They did. For a second, and then I put my finger over it.
Gwen, welcome. You are not muted.
Oh God, look out. They saw you.
Okay, Tula, could you, yeah, there she goes. Okay, go ahead, Pat, sorry about that.
So I joined the board of AFP Chicago in 2017 at the invitation of the then president to become the champion for the Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, and Access initiative. And this fits very squarely into that work. So I'm really glad to be here. And we're going to start with a couple of polls, if my friend Tula can pull those up, to just get a sense of who is in the room. That will be helpful to me and maybe of interest to all of you. Okay, so take a second and fill out this poll. Click, you get one choice on each of these. How long you've been a professional fundraiser and how many fundraisers there are on your development team. We'll give you about 20 seconds to do that. And Tula, once you think the majority of folks who are going to answer that, there may be people on their phone or multitasking or what have you who.
Yeah. So I'm going to end the poll. It looks like 25 out of the 27 individuals on the line have responded. So excellent. Let me just click the end.
Okay. And now I think you can share the results.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. So there's a wide variety of experience in the profession, with the majority being more than 10 years. So that's fascinating. So you're here because you're in a small shop. And how many fundraisers? So 40% have one and 20%. Okay. So otherwise it's spread. So again, we have a wide variety. Thank you, Tula. Can you close that? Okay, thank you. Great. So I am going to start my screen, start sharing my screen, and we're going to go for maybe 30 minutes, maybe less than that. And then if you have questions, please put those into the chat, and I won't be able to see them, but Tula has promised me that she'll monitor the chat, and I'm happy to be interrupted with questions because I think that will make it easier to answer them in the context of whatever it is that I'm talking about. So please feel free to put your questions into the chat, and Tula will interrupt me. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. We did rehearse this. There we go. Can everybody see that? Thumbs up? Yes, wonderful. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for having me here. The focus of this presentation is on planning for success, and particularly in the context of small shops. It doesn't mean that this isn't relevant for larger shops. I actually think it is. It simply means that the focus here is on small shops and what you can do with a limited number of people and a limited number of resources. All right, so we've done the welcome. I'm sorry not to have more of an opportunity to find out where you're from. I'm guessing from Tom's introduction that we're spread across the country. I saw that Melissa's here from Northern Ohio. I grew up in Northern Ohio, so we probably know some people. And so we're done with the welcome introductions. I'm going to talk initially about building a culture of philanthropy because I think this is really important. The bulk of the presentation is on a fundraising plan, creating a fundraising plan, and what are the building blocks of that. And then we'll talk about next steps. So there's a lot of difference between a culture of philanthropy and the way fundraising is done in some shops. So the contrast here between a culture of philanthropy is with what I'm calling transactional fundraising. And this is a situation where an organization is passively receiving gifts. The focus is on the transaction. I ask, you give. It's very much short-term based on whatever is needed in the fiscal year, a particular fiscal year, and again, what the organization needs. So there's not a lot of conversation, there's not a lot of dialogue. In a transactional fundraising model, the fundraising team is largely doing the fundraising. There's very little engagement of anyone else in the organization. There may not even be much board engagement. In a culture of philanthropy, the whole organization is involved in fundraising, and everyone understands that they have a role in fundraising. So I'll give just one example. Back in the day when someone was answering the phone for an organization or there was a receptionist, that person is a critical link in the fundraising. So I'm just going to say, you know, whoever is your first point of contact with a donor or a prospective donor is really key to the impression that individual gets. So the person contacting that person gets about the organization. And whoever is that first point of contact needs to understand that they play a critical role in the fundraising process. In a culture of philanthropy, you're actively pursuing philanthropic investments. So you're having conversations with your donors about their philanthropic interests along with the needs of the organization. And I like to think about fundraising as the process of matching donor passions with organizational needs and giving donors the opportunity to feel that they're making a difference, that their investment is having an impact on the lives of individuals. In my experience, that's what most people want from their philanthropy. If you're doing events, they are transformational. They are focused, they're mission-based, they're focused on the mission, they're making money, and they're in the context of how do we advance the relationship with the donors, with the individuals who are there in the room. And the focus is on longer term societal needs. So it's not just what the organization is doing in this moment, but what are the needs of the population that's being served, of the clients, of the communities that you're partnering with. And if you want in the Q&A, if you want in the conversational part of this, we can talk about what it takes to build that culture of philanthropy. So, hold on. Okay, there we go. Mostly what I'm going to talk about today is the value of having a fundraising plan. And I am such a huge proponent of this, although I didn't always have it when I was working as a frontline fundraiser. These bullet points show what the value is of having a plan. And I really believe it does give you greater focus and more freedom. So the plan is constructed with the whole fund development team, with the CEO, executive director, with the board. So it's really clear what the focus is, and the freedom comes in knowing this is what we're doing and this is what we need to do to achieve our goals. So the plan is based on evaluating the past, what worked, where are we getting our greatest ROI, and then what do we want and need to be doing for the future. As I said, there's involvement by the stakeholders and there's clarity about roles and responsibilities. So the board is really clear in particular about what its roles and responsibilities are and what the staff does. The CEO or the executive director is really clear about their role and their responsibility with regard to fundraising. And having a plan makes the accountability realistic. So it's really clear both the financial goal, but also what the activities are that support the financial goal. And it helps you stay the course. So when a board member or the CEO or another volunteer says, hey, I've got a great idea. You know, this other organization is doing a climbing event and I think we should do that. Or they're doing a wine auction, or they're doing, oftentimes it's around events. And if you've got a plan, you can say, well, you know, that's an interesting idea and we can look into that. And we've got a plan for this year. And let's see how your enthusiasm and energy can be directed toward the activities that are in the plan. And finally, having a plan raises your credibility because it indicates that you are, sorry about that, that you are forward thinking, that you are planful, that you are disciplined, and that you know where you're going. All right, so the building blocks of a fundraising plan, there are 4 of them: the dollars, the leadership, engagement, which is about cultivation and stewardship, and internal systems. Very important, the dollars. Not the only thing, and very important. So, in thinking about the fundraising goal, there are 2 things at least to consider. One of them is your capacity, and another one is the organizational need. So strategic considerations. What was your goal last year? Did you meet your goal? How did you meet your goal? So maybe you met it because you got a windfall, you got a bequest, you got a major gift that you hadn't anticipated or solicited, you got a one-time foundation grant that's not going to be repeated. So it's really important to look at the goal last year, what you met, and what can be repeated. Also, obviously, pressing needs. What are the pressing needs of the organization? And then where are there shared aspirations and a shared vision? And finally, what is the capacity of your community of donors? You've got some existing donors, you might have some potential for to acquire some new donors. What is their capacity? And then you take a look at the data, looking at things like donor retention, looking at the number of donors. So if you have 300 donors now, and you have 500 people in your database who have given at some time, you don't want to set a goal, we're going to have 1,000 donors, because where are those donors going to come from? And you need to look again at reliable income. So, you know, we always do a mailing and it brings in this amount of money. And then the question is, you know, how can we get those donors to increase? How can we upgrade them? And again, where can we find some new donors? And if you want to talk specifically about any of those, again, I'm happy to do that. In looking at your fundraising strategies, you want to look at who to ask. And this is also useful in terms of thinking about your major donors. So at the core of your fundraising strategy should be the folks who know you and love you. Hopefully your board members are in that. And then of course your major donors are there. I would also say the folks who are giving to you year after year after year in small amounts fall into this category of knows and loves. And those folks are, they may not be your prospect for a major gift, although they may be. They're certainly a prospect for a planned gift. And they may very well already have you in their estate plan and you don't even know about it. Second circle is who knows. So knows is different than the third circle, which is knows of. Easter Seals obviously has significant brand recognition, although I'm guessing a lot of people know the name and might not know precisely what you're doing. They might know what you used to do. They might not know what you're doing today. So in the B, knows is they know who you are. They know what you're doing. They maybe haven't had enough engagement yet to really say, oh, I really love the work they're doing. Oh, I'm really intrigued by the services that they provide. But they know you. And then they know of you. And then who are the people who should know about you? And again, happy to have conversation. And I think all of you, one of the beauties of working in an affiliate structure like Easter Seals is that you're not competing with one another. You've got geographic territories, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I worked for the Girl Scouts and we had a wonderful peer learning and an exchange of knowledge and best practices, because what worked for one council might very well work for another. So a conversation about, well, who should know about us? Who in the community should know about us? Who in the geography should know about us? All right. So creating a fundraising plan has to do with looking at the variety of buckets of income. And I've put just 3 on here. This is a sample of an overview of what a fundraising plan would look like. This is not the fundraising plan per se, because there would be significantly more detail about how we get to each of these goals. That would be in the fundraising plan. But this is a really helpful overview and a useful document to share with the board when you're sharing the fundraising plan. So 3 buckets where funds revenue comes in. The first is board contributions. So again, the goal here is set based on at least a couple things. One is on past giving. The second is on capacity. So your board members should have your organization, I would say, in the top third of their philanthropic priorities. So they might be giving to a university, they might be giving to their faith community. And if they're sitting on your board, you ought to be there among the top third. So if you're not, that's a conversation to start to have with them. If they are not, that's a conversation to start to have with the board. And this upgrade in the column new, renew, or upgrade refers to it's based on the idea that your board members are already giving. They may very well not be. And I would say the first goal you want to have with your board is 100% participation. That's often a question on grant proposals, what percent of your board supports. And it's really, really important to be able to say 100% of our board is supporting our organization. And how do you get those gifts? They're gotten in individual meetings. And the people who solicit those gifts, it really should not be the fund development staff. It really should be your board chair and your board development chair. So it should be a peer-to-peer ask, because that is the strongest ask. And it really should happen, if you can, in the first quarter of your fiscal year. And the beauty of this is there's no cost to that. Okay, your annual fund are the gifts that come in on a yearly basis in smaller amounts. And obviously these dollar goals are very arbitrary. Yours could be 10,000, yours could be 100,000, yours could be 5,000, 200,000. It's really based on the size of your organization, your constituency, the longevity of the organization, how many champions you've got out there, what you've been doing. And again, you're going to hopefully find some new donors. You're going to renew folks, so get them to give the same gift. And hopefully you've got a strategy in place to upgrade your donors. To say, you've been giving to us, $25 a year for the last year. We really appreciate that. This is done, by the way, in a mail or an email. It's not done face-to-face, these gifts. So you're asking them, would you consider a gift of $35 this year? Would you consider a gift of $50 a year? And this is the responsibility of the fund development staff. And it generally happens more than once a year. And there's various schools of thoughts about this. Some organizations, and maybe you're the recipient of these, you get a mailing from them once a month. I think that's too many. That's personal. I'm not even sure what the research says about that, but more than once a year is recommended. And there's a significant cost, particularly if you're doing paper mailings here. So this is not the most efficient way to raise money. You don't get the highest return on your investment in your annual fund. What the annual fund is doing is surfacing your prospects for major gifts and for planned gifts. So the third category I've got here is major gifts. And these are people, and you define what a major gift is. And, it's really based on the level of giving currently. So you don't want to set your major gift threshold so that there's 2 people in that category. I'm doing some coaching with an organization, and asked the development director what a major gift, and he said, well, we'd set it at 5,000, and that was 2 people. So they've dropped it down to 1,000, and now they've got 12 who are giving, and others who have potential, because they've got people giving somewhere between 500 to 1,000. So those are potential major gift donors. And again, you're looking for new folks. So coming out of your annual fund, some folks you're going to renew, and some folks you're going to try to upgrade. And these are done in individual meetings. These are done in face-to-face meetings, Zoom to Zoom meetings, telephone. Best is face-to-face. Barring that, I'd say Zoom. Phone meeting, you start to lose some of the clues that you get when you're face-to-face with someone. So if they can be arranged, they're really best done in person or face-to-face. And the people who do these are the board chair, the development chair, and the staff, depending on who's got the strongest relationship with the individual. They happen throughout the year, and the cost, again, is very, very little on this. So it's a highly effective solicitation strategy. There would, of course, be events on this and planned gifts on this. I am not a fan of events, even though that's the way many organizations do fundraising, and particularly smaller organizations. They're very labor intensive, they're very cost intensive, and you get the lowest return on your investment from events. So they can have value in terms of exposing the organization to individuals. And as a fundraising strategy, I would say they shouldn't be at the top of your list. All right, so who's involved with this fundraising? And this is particularly relevant, I think, if you're a one-person shop. You just can't do everything. You've got to get other people involved and other staff involved as well. And then everybody has a role The development committee, and hopefully you have a development committee, or maybe you don't. It's something to think about if you don't. There are 3 roles for individuals on your development committee, and this is generally a committee of the board. It can also include volunteers who are not on the board. It's a great way to try people out, to give people some exposure to the organization, and to see how they work, see if they play well with others, and might move up to being on the board. Their roles are as ambassadors, as advocates, and askers. And not everybody on the development committee and not everybody on the board needs to play all those 3 roles. You want everybody to be doing something, and you want to train them so they feel comfortable in whatever role they've chosen. The board's responsibility is generally a give-get that may be formalized. You may have it in your board policies that there's a give and a get. It might be informal. It might not. It might be a conversation you haven't had at all. If you haven't, I would recommend it, because the board has fiscal responsibility for the organization. And again, if they're sitting on the board, it's my opinion, they ought to be supporting the organization financially. And they need to be trained. If that's something you can do it. Boards often are much more willing to listen to somebody else. So maybe there's somebody else in the national structure that can provide that training. Maybe you bring a consultant in to do the training. It's really valuable to help board members get comfortable in their role, particularly if you're wanting them to do solicitation. You can have key volunteers who involve other committees. You might have a program committee that has a role. There might be opportunities to bring donors to events and to have volunteers. And I'm not talking about fundraising events. I'm talking about program related events. And you have other volunteers there who, again, are ambassadors, and they're talking about why they volunteer and why they love the program and why they're passionate about. And that goes a long way with donors and prospective donors. And then with the staff, you've got whoever is the lead on your development. If it's a 1-person shop, then it's you. There might be a development director and somebody else. The executive director clearly has a role in fundraising. Some executive directors understand that, some don't, some like to do it, some don't. I really see the role of development team is to manage up and to help that executive director become more comfortable with fundraising and more willing to engage in the process. And I'm going to say from firsthand experience, it's hard to do. It's really hard to do if you've got a reluctant executive director or CEO. And it's worth working at, because they are, in many cases, the face of your organization, and they have a critical role to play. And then, of course, you can use consultants in any of this. The third piece of the puzzle here is donor cultivation, stewardship, and marketing. And cultivation refers to what you do with donors before they give a gift. Stewardship is what you do after they've given a gift. And it's really a cycle. It's not linear, it's a cycle. So you cultivate a donor, you solicit a donor, you steward a donor. The stewardship turns into cultivation because you're moving toward their next gift. And the point of this slide is just to say, you want to engage your donors throughout the year. You want to thank them. You want to work on strengthening the relationship. You want to offer them opportunities to be engaged with your organization as a volunteer, as an operational volunteer, as a programmatic volunteer. Just how can they begin to feel like they really belong? Asking them to serve as a leader, asking them to serve on a committee, asking them to serve on the board. There's a correlation between the extent of a volunteer's involvement and the amount that they give, a positive correlation. So the effect of all of this cultivation and stewardship is to be able to ask for an increased gift. And what that means, an increased gift is a more meaningful gift. So both more meaningful to the organization and more meaningful to the donor. There are lots of people who are making nominal gifts to an organization. And I know for myself, my charitable giving, there are some organizations that I support with a gift, which really isn't a stretch for me. And there are other organizations where I have become enamored with the mission. I've become engaged with the organization, and I'm making gifts that are more of a stretch for me. So that comes about through engagement with donors. And key to this is talking about what makes your organization unique, what you're doing that nobody else is doing, the needs that you're meeting that no one else is meeting. And you want to have a calendar. You want to have a yearly calendar that's broken out by levels. So you have your activities down the left-hand side and your levels across the top, and it says, we're going to thank the donor. Everybody gets a thank you. And I know some organizations, I've consulted with organizations where only if you give a gift of $250 or more do you get a thank you, because that's the limit that the IRS sets. And I highly recommend everybody gets thanked, because you don't know the capacity of those $25 and $50 donors, those $5 and $10 donors. You just don't know their capacity. So everybody needs to be stewarded. And you set out a calendar that shows when these activities are happening. And then with your major donors, you've got an individual calendar for them. So you've got your touch points laid out for your top 10, 15, 20 prospects, and it's actually a calendar. Donor communications and marketing. So these are, again, all the ways that you're touching the lives of your donors. You may or may not be doing these. You may or may not have a newsletter. Most organizations these days are putting out some kind of e-newsletter. I personally am still a fan of paper newsletters, and I'm guessing that your donor constituents skew a little bit older. I like to read newsletters that I get from the organizations I support when I'm eating my breakfast. And I am not likely to read a newsletter on my phone or on my computer. So I'm still an advocate of paper newsletters. Brochures, annual reports. Some organizations are still doing paper annual reports. Others have it on their website. I support the Nature Conservancy. They sent me a postcard and said, if you want a printed copy, let us know, we'll send you one. That's another way organizations are doing it. Your donor materials are also part of your communication, and they're part of your branding. And then obviously online is critical these days. Your donation page needs to be really easy to make a donation. Needs to be clear what the donations are supporting and the impact. Your social media, everybody's on social media. Again, paying attention to where your constituents are. So, you know, if they skew younger, well, let me say, if they skew older, they're probably not on Instagram, at least the majority. I'm making generalizations, obviously. They probably are on Facebook. They may be on LinkedIn. Instagram's kind of that middle age. And I don't even know where the younger donors, what social media they're engaging in. If those are your donor constituents, you need to have that information. And finally, your internal systems. One of my colleagues talks about the internal systems as running shoes. So if you're a runner, you can run in just about anything. You can run in flip-flops, you can run in water shoes, you can run in boots. And if you really want to run most efficiently and effectively, you're going to get yourself a good pair of running shoes. And that's what your internal systems are. They're the groundwork, the infrastructure that makes it possible for you to succeed with all of the rest. And I'm not going to go into detail on these, but tracking is really, really, really important. So hopefully you have a database that is more than an Excel spreadsheet where you're tracking your contacts with your donors, their gift history, what events they're coming to, how they like to be recognized. Do they want to be anonymous? Really, really, really important if they want to be anonymous. Do they like to have their name on things? Do they like people to know about their gifts? Again, that's so critical in stewarding your donors. And it will determine, it will make the difference between, and this is my experience with a donor, between, you know, a 4-figure gift and a 6-figure gift. You have a record of your meetings and your phone calls. And if they're giving a gift that's restricted, you have that information in your database. your gift acknowledgement. It's a process that has to be worked out with finance as well. I know that can be really tricky, but again, it's a really critical piece. And evaluation. So how are you evaluating your programs? How are you sharing that information with your donors? And that is the end of my formal presentation. I know that this is a really broad overview, and I've talked about the pieces of fundraising plan, but not really about how to put one together. If you have questions, specific questions that we don't get to today, I'm happy to answer those. My contact information, my email is here, as well as my phone number. You can text. And I am happy to answer specific questions and direct you to additional resources. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and see what questions you have.
Is it okay if I ask a question just like this without typing it?
Okay. Oh, yes, yes, of course.
Okay. My question is, if you are a one-person shop, when you put together this plan, do you recommend sort of allocating a percentage of time spent on particular work, such as, being sure your database and your data is correct, and your time with major gifts, and your time, with, if there is a minimal amount of events? Do you recommend incorporating that, or is that?
Absolutely, yes. I think that can be really helpful, because one of the questions people have in small shops is like, how do I do it all? How do I make sure I get everything done? And so being clear, yes, I'm going to spend 4 hours a week on major gifts, and I'm actually going to track that. So I know, on Monday I spend an hour, on Tuesday I spend 2 hours, and on Friday I spend an hour. So absolutely, yes. Looking at, how long do things take? And that will help you sort out where your time is going and what kind of return you're getting on it. So if you're spending 50% of your time on events and they're bringing in a quarter of your budget, you know that there's a mismatch there. So yes, absolutely would recommend a time allocation.
Yeah, thank you.
Pat, a number of our affiliates, and I've worked in small offices as well in previous, in a previous life, events were always important. Of course, COVID has changed that, but I'm starting to see that events are coming back into the swing of things, and people are going to have their first in-person event. If you do have events, what do you recommend people do to incorporate them to become more sustainable donors and donors that stick with you for a little bit?
Great question. Yeah. So what you're looking to do is to convert your event donors into regular donors. So there are a number of strategies around that. One is, if it's an event people register for, you look at who's coming, and you can identify who are your current donors, who are people with capacity, who are people from the community who may not be donors. And then what we did at the last place that I worked, we would actually meet with senior leadership ahead of the event and assign people and say, okay, you need to try to find these 3 people, and you need to have a conversation with them, and you need to come back and let us know about your conversation. So utilizing, again, other staff. So having a strategy for the event, and then following up with those folks after the event and making sure that they're connected to the mission. And thirdly is, at the event, making sure that the event has, if it's not totally mission-based, it's got some mission component. So they're not just there drinking wine and bidding on silent auction items, but you've got a video, you've got a variety of touch points that have to do with the mission, so that you're converting those people from, I came to this event because my friend asked me to, oh, this is really interesting, and I'm interested in what they're doing.
So I have a question, and actually I'm a CEO on Career End, and kind of looking at the transition to kind of pivot into the future around philanthropy. And because I've been around, I guess, a long time in my affiliate, I've never worked anywhere else professionally. If you can imagine that, for 44 years, it always seemed, because of our size, that I would serve as the director of development. And so now our organization has grown considerably. And I have to say that I know all the elements of a good development plan. In years past, probably practiced things more precisely, because our affiliate, and I don't know about all of you on the call, practice very, very intense direct service involving highly regulated, licensed, and governmental funded programs. And so trying to balance all of those relationships within, the focus on private philanthropy, and of course the role of a governing board who has to have such a high level of involvement in governance, and almost at times there isn't a match for some of the philanthropic sides of things. So we've always tried to preserve the private sector part of our Easter Seals affiliate, because social causes certainly can't be, the work that we do really is highly dependent on governmental funds. And so articulating that is so important. But given that now we're moving into a transition, we have basically a one-person shop, and that individual is going to be leaving the organization. So what should I be looking at now? The people that I've worked with through the years, the personal calls that we've made, those people are all my age and older and moving off into the sunset, quite frankly. And so looking at newer generations of people, certainly we perpetuate a culture of philanthropy because we've had to here. Not interested in returning to some of the events that we've had in the past. We do a telethon. I don't call it an event, I call it a broadcast, and I call it something to engage communities and to celebrate the work. But certainly we raise money, so to speak. But what are the qualities of a candidate that we would want to look at? All of you, I mean, my gosh, you have such full plates. How are we going to do all that? Where would I focus, in the recruitment of someone? Would it be a program person internally? No.
I have to, the DLN could be of very significant support to you, Deb. And I believe you have someone who's leaving through retirement and to go for
Yes.
new and really exciting in her life. And we all love Deb.
Yes, of course.
I would happily talk with you offline but I don't want to just discourage the conversation, but the DLN is here to help CEOs in this particular scenario also.
Good.
And one of the things that we are really trying to push as an organization is that to build a culture where people move from one affiliate to another affiliate. We want to keep people inside the Easter Seals family. But if there's an advancement opportunity for someone who is coming up in the industry, coming up in fundraising, coming up in philanthropy, there may be an opportunity for you to create a new track for them professionally with this change. So we're committed to encouraging people to stay inside Easter Seals, but to another affiliate in order to meet your personal development needs.
Great.
Happy to talk with you offline. We actually have a strategy to support you, but I don't want to take away from Pat or anyone else's thoughts on that.
Well, in the other niche area, we have many opportunities for grant writing. The grant writing is very technical. And so, I do a lot of grant writing still because I'm a rehab counselor, and you have to be able to do all the matrix and the outcomes and, answer all the very difficult technical programmatic questions. So we continue to put teams of people together. But again, there's more grant writing that I would think would be better placed in a development group, so to speak, but not certainly a single person shop. I can't see one person being able to have all those skills and abilities or time, in other words. So we're trying to sort that out.
Through kind of a transition, and our affiliate right now will be doing over the next couple of years, and we're moving all grant. A lot of our program staff has written our grants historically, and we're beginning to move all that into development as well, and looking to hire somebody to do our grants and corporate development. So I think it makes sense for that to kind of shift over if you're making those changes into kind of a development responsibility. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you about anything as well.
And those certainly are different skills, grant writing. I mean,
Sure.
so I didn't even have the corporate foundation piece. I was really addressing individuals because 80% of the funding comes from individuals. And I know you're heavily government funded, and, you know, having worked for an organization that was government funded, that's not always reliable.
Yes,
So,
yes.
you know, building that base of individual philanthropy and diversifying your fundraising sources is really key.
Pat, I want to speak to what you were talking about just a moment ago, related. So I've dropped into this, the chat box here, asking strategic questions, which I think goes to your point about talking to people about why they're interested in our work, or encouraging people to get more interested in different components. So that link is there for everyone. It was done by Karen Osborne, who is world-renowned philanthropy consultant and advisor, public speaker. And I totally stole that years ago and have been using it ever since. I sit down with my senior leadership team, executive leadership team, I always give them this document. And although they may not use every single question, God knows they won't, it's so many pages, there may be one or two that they can remember and they can use in their interactions at a special event, or at a cocktail party, or a house party, or at the grocery store when they have on an Easter seal shirt. Whatever the situation is, these questions have proven very helpful in my leadership team coming back to communicate what they've learned from prospective donors or donors.
Thanks, Tom. I see that there's a question in the chat about how to engage program and office staff in the fundraising process. We have a peer-to-peer campaign. We need their involvement. The struggle to get them involved. One of the levers you have with program people, perhaps, depending on how you're funded, is if any of the funds that you're raising, what is it doing? You know, are they supporting programs? Do those people have an interest in you meeting your fundraising goals? So that's one sort of self-serving. The other thing is, I'd say in terms of peer-to-peer fundraising, it's important to make it fun, you know, put the fun in fundraising. So is there a way, I'm not a big fan of competition, you know, and sometimes that motivates people. So are there ways to incentivize their engagement? Are there ways to create some friendly competition? How can you make it fun for them to be involved? And how can you help them see the value of their engagement in it? So talking to them about their own passion for the organization, because that's what they're going to need to put forth in order to raise funds. So why are they working there? And then asking them to communicate that to friends. Are there other people who have ideas about this, who've done similar kinds of programs? Susan, do you want to share that? That's great. Yeah, using program staff for stewardship, thank you notes, phone calls, assisting with tours, photos, clients, testimonials. Making thank you calls is one of the best ways to engage your board, because then they get to talk to a donor and they get to hear why somebody else is passionate about the organization. So having your program staff do that, I think, is also a really great idea.
And thank you, Susan, for saying that about stewardship. One of the things that we did is we developed a PowerPoint presentation on how to take a picture. And so we did that, and we trained our different program staff on how to take a picture, because pictures speak a lot louder than words sometimes, but we have to make sure that the picture tells a story and has all the correct elements in it, our brand, and a bunch of other things. And so we found that that was very helpful to the program staff, so that they understood better what we need to articulate to our donors. And so helping them, they're the best storytellers we have. And so training them and helping them to understand a little bit about the development elements of our organization have worked out extremely well. Yeah, so.
Right.
Michael, send it around. Share.
Okay, I can do that.
In this chat box, send it to us in an email. My God, we need that.
Tricia, I have a question. This is Cindy from Massachusetts regarding moving from a culture, transactional to more of philanthropy. So how do you propose, oh gosh, I just lost my thought. Oh, I'm sorry. It may cycle back to me, but to involving the program staff to I have a background also in business development and marketing. So joining East of Seals of Massachusetts, my approach with the program team has always been, as I try to engage new mission partners, really focusing more on the program side and how they can help company. So really lending a hand before we ask for money. And that seems to build my credibility with the program team, because they just see like dollar signs when development people talk. And I'm like, it's not just about money, it's about building a relationship with individuals, and we have value, and how can we provide that value first before we ask for them to support us financially. And yeah, that culture side, they may cycle back, and I'll butt back in. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. Again, providing opportunities for your donors to engage with your mission is a win for the donors and obviously for the organization.
Oh, I got it. I'm sorry again. So building that culture of philanthropy is also an investment, right? So how do you sort of demonstrate to the executive team that there's a cost of doing this as a business? So, if we want to do a really nice signature event, we're not going to just do it on the cheap, if you will. So we're going to put together a really nice, elegant event, and it may not net a great return on, not a great net for the programs, but as far as the PR value, it's priceless. So how do you sort of convince executives where it's been more that transactional, let's get the money in the door, versus this is really an investment that we're making for a future return, if you will?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that, because elegant events. I think with your events, what you want to really do is events that have heart to them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that there's always a direct correlation between the cost and the amount of heart. So anybody else want to field that question?
I think, Pat, what you mentioned earlier, that you need to create a strategy of how you're going to engage these donors before and after the event. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember being at another organization where at an event, our board members would always sit at the board table. Well, I came in and I started breaking them up. Oh my gosh, hands went up. People are like, what am I going to do? But it proved to be an opportunity. We had like 20 board members. It was great because we were able to spread 20 people across the room, even though we might have had 50 tables. It didn't matter, because at least, half or a third of the tables had a board member. And then strategically, we placed staff at tables and the program folks. I remember at one point, the person who ran the meal program was always in the back. We brought her out to the front and asked her to sit with individuals. And it was really, I don't want to say game changing, but people became more engaged, and we gained volunteers, and we had an opportunity to engage more donors. So just things like that. But certainly after the event, there has to be some sort of follow-up and engagement with that donor as well. So, for the affiliates who want to do the events, I think a lot of time and effort has to probably be spent on strategically thinking about how you're going to engage these individuals once the event is over.
Yeah, and that's a great strategy, spreading your board and your program staff around the tables.
I know.
And participants where there's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
I think we have time for probably one more question. No more questions. Well, Pat, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. This was an exceptional presentation. I must have gotten 10 messages from people saying how much they enjoyed it and how beneficial it was for them. Genuinely, we cannot thank you enough for your support. I hope everybody will take an opportunity to link you in and look to you as a consultant or advisor in the future. And want to just tell everybody thank you again for attending what is our 5th professional development, 5th professional development session. As we get closer to the end of the year, we'll send all of the videos of all of the recordings to everybody. However, this recording will be going out here in just maybe today, maybe tomorrow, we'll see.
Yeah.
So but in the next 24 hours, we'll get it out to everybody.
Absolutely.
But, thank you so much, Pat, for being with us today and for helping us.
And
thank you, Tom. My pleasure.
I'm sorry. And I just personally wanted to thank Pat, because Pat and I serve on the board of AFP Chicago. And when I reached out to her, she did not hesitate one second to say yes. So thank you so much, Pat. I do appreciate your support.
Okay. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.